And welcome back to the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Games and Things. Scott and Lisa Mellon, I'm sure, want to thank you for taking part in their big spring clearance sale this past week. But as is always the case, these folks have great deals all year long. They are truly the best place to shop for home theater seats and pool tables. Much more than that, of course, but in terms of those big items, boy, they are just tip-top for those two things, home theater seating, pool tables, Games and Things. Get out there and check out their showroom or visit them online at ourgameroom.com because life should be fun. All right, Tennessee lost another member of its 2021 class this week when defensive lineman Isaac Washington announced he was transferring out. Martavius French also announced he was leaving this week, but he was here a year ago. These guys were on suspension along with Aaron Willis because of a burglary assault episode a couple of months ago. They faced misdemeanor drug possession and drug paraphernalia charges. Caden Salter was also part of that group, but his charges against him were dropped. He's still suspended, though. Here's the deal. The 2021 class has lost some of its best guys. Let's go ahead and put up the list if we can. I mean, arguably these are the top 5 guys on your list. And they are all gone. One to Auburn, one to Miami, one to Missouri, and a couple others are out the door waiting to go somewhere. It was ranked about 15th when the classes came in. And it's always going to, people are always going to see it and think 15th. And I think that's going to haunt Josh Heupel and the university because we've seen it. Everybody goes back and does those stories. Well, the last 4 years, Tennessee has averaged this in recruiting. It's like, yes, but 45 of those guys have transferred.
Right.
So those rankings don't mean anything. So you're going to have people sitting here in a couple of years saying, how is Josh Heupel only winning 5 games a year when he had a top 15 class? It's not a top 15 class. And I think that's going to haunt them. Josh, you have another reason that you think this class is going to haunt them.
Yeah,
a more tangible.
Right. The defensive line. 2 of the names on there, Katron Evans and Isaac Washington. That leaves Tennessee with 1 interior defensive lineman in the 2021 class. And Amari McNeil, who, if you pull up a recruiting service, will list him as an offensive lineman, but he's likely going to be a defensive lineman at Tennessee. That leaves you 1 in this class. At arguably the most important position is right up there with the offensive line, of course, besides quarterback. But if you look at the position, with 1 coming in, currently, John, I see 6 players on the roster with eligibility beyond 2021 who could play on the interior, on the defensive line. And part of that is projecting somebody shifting over. They could, of course, move an offensive lineman, so that's subject to change. But right now, the depth of interior defensive linemen is a huge concern beyond this year because of players being taken out already from the 21 class.
The good news is you now have the transfer portal spinning like never before, which you didn't have that opportunity with offensive linemen after the Dooley situation. Not at least to this extent, but the problem there is what kind of guys do you get?
Right.
How many upgrades can you just go out and find? A lot of these guys you get, they're transferring because they're not starting where they are.
Also, unless rules change, that still counts against how many players you can bring in. So you're battling a numbers issue without knowing if Tennessee loses any scholarships because of the NCAA case.
And you still got some of the question marks about where a couple of those kids are going to end up, correct?
Yep.
I mean, one of them's going to Auburn, one of them's going to Missouri.
And
how many more end up on your schedule that you may end up playing? Not only do you lose them, but now you're going to have to be trying
in
to
the
block
conference. Yeah. I just terrible situation. I think it, throw this into it's another log on the Jeremy Pruitt fire. That you had guys that signed this year that weren't on campus 2 weeks before they wound up suspended and gone. Did he do anything? I would argue, and I know there are people who hate this guy and hate that guy. There's nobody even close in the last 50 years to being as bad in a complete and total way as Jeremy Pruitt was. Every aspect, every facet failed.
Well, especially once you bring possible NCAA sanctions into the equation.
Well, and nobody's talking about it, but here's the other thing. If you're sitting there going, well, he won these games, if it turns out he was paying players and those players were playing, which means those games they were ineligible, he may wind up with 0 wins on his record. Take out the NCAA. He still sucked worse than anybody else they've had over there. You could find some positives about Battle. Butch Jones had a couple of 9-win seasons, top 25 finishes. Lane Kiffin was only here long enough to not do much damage.
Derek
Dooley was terrible, but there's where your NCAA comes in. At least he didn't leave you from orbit. Bob, is there any debate that this is the worst guy of the last 50 years?
No, and here's the thing about Derek Dooley. I mean, if you sit there and in a blind test, you watch was Derek Dooley's teams really worse than Jeremy Pruitt's teams? I mean, what Jeremy Pruitt seemed to score the biggest points for was bringing in talent. Okay, we know maybe part of the reason he was bringing it in had to do with Big Macs and
I know nobody
filet-o-fish
brought it
sandwiches.
in like everybody hyped it up either.
Exactly. The talent hadn't been there, and then you throw in the NCAA stuff like you said. And so I think, no, if somebody said right now, bring back Dooley or bring back Pruitt, bring back Derek Dooley all day long. We're still not going to be good, but we're not going to be in any trouble bad.
That's a good way of looking at it. If you had a tournament and put Pruitt head-to-head with any of these guys, who would you bring him back ahead of? None. In my opinion. Does anybody disagree?
And also had never been a head coach before, and there was indications clearly was in over his head on a lot of the aspects of running the overall program.
Well, this 2021 class, which he had a final say in, is now falling apart as well. So it's just like the icing on the crap cake that was Jeremy Pruitt. All right, when we come back, Athletic Director Danny White says he wants Tennessee to be innovators. He says they've been innovators in the past. They want to be innovators as an athletic department moving forward. We'll talk about what that means. Is that what people want to hear? And then we'll, a little later, get into the fact that can you be innovators at a school with so many traditions? Come on back on the Sports Source.